This is the Miller Philosopher. So if you saw the last video of what would have happened if the Sindar had held out better in Western Beleriand during the first stage, then this is going to be a follow-up of that, because apparently that did seem to go well with some people. So I just want to finish that thought up. And don't worry, I'm going to try and not go really deep into this. Again, this is the conclusion of this fan fiction timeline that I'm kind of making up here. That being said, I will put a link to that video below, so that if you are curious about that and have not caught up on that, you can just click on that and hear what I have to say about that there. But basically, the end of the first age would have essentially sped up if the Sindar had held out, I think. But the question remains now if what happens to the second age in this vastly different Middle Earth. Well, I think the biggest change is going to be with no Edain of the first age, because Thingol would have banned humans from entering Beleriand. There was essentially no Numenor of the second age. And assuming Beleriand is still around because a weaker army of Morgoth than the one in the Silmarillion's War of Wrath might not require so much destructive force, it would also, I think, still be a wreck. And there would be at least more Noldor and Sindar in number, since they had holdouts in Hithlum, Nargothrond, Gondolin, and Doriath. I think Gondolin, at the start of the second age, would be abandoned because, as I said in the previous video, the Noldor there had the greatest longing for Valinor, and would most likely follow the summons to return, Turgon included, though I doubt Aradhel would go back. And now, with the threat of Morgoth gone, Nargothrond, which had chosen to isolate itself like it does in Silmarillion, now would probably come out of hiding, so to speak, and with the remaining Sindar, who they've been allied with from the beginning, try to rebuild Beleriand with the Sindar. Whether Thingol would still be king is questionable, because I think Eowyn would have compelled, but not forced, Melian to return with him back to Valinor, citing the inappropriateness of some of her being and power remaining in Middle-earth as it was becoming less and less mystical. And the Noldor of Hithlum would also eventually spread out across Beleriand, since the war is now done. And this is because, with the Sindar as an overall faction, would be greatly weakened in the aftermath of this particular War of Wrath, and the political shakeup that may follow regarding what Thingol and Melian decide. So now the Noldor may either resettle across Beleriand, like they do in the Silmarillion, or perhaps go further east of the Blue Mountains, or both. I think Fingon would still reign as king of the Noldor, but as being willingly submissive to Finarfin, who would return back to Valinor as the sole and only High King of the Noldor. I also think there would still be elven migrations east, but perhaps not as great as in number, because Beleriand may still be around. But however, this time around, Eriador would be much more populated by people, mortals, who held a deep ancestral grudge against the elves for shutting their ancestors back in their time of need. Indeed, conflicts might actually even break out because of this. An effective cultural and racial barrier now reversed from my fictional first age, from when Thingol had banned humans from going west. Now, humans may try to ban elves from coming east. I think Sauron would also too still go into hiding, but find probably that all, if not most of humanity living in Eriador, much more willing to ally with him in his eventual war against the elves, which I do think still happens. All that being said, I see the second age playing out in two ways in this timeline if the Sindar had resisted better during the first age. The first is that the war between Sauron and the elves would play out probably much sooner. I think the Noldor would have still learned something from their disasters in the previous age and not be as quick to engage in battle with the mortals, and that this would too also be their first encounter with mortality. However, Sauron would be able to set up his HQ much further north than Mordor because of this pre-existing animosity, perhaps even in Eriador itself, and have a much stronger realm to oppose the West and Beleriand. Also, Galadriel I can see take the place of her brother Finrod as an ambassador to humanity because she was still taught by Melian, and because yes, the elves got some serious explaining to do about their behavior during the First Age, and the less enemies they have to fight with, the better. But with the bad blood being seeded by Thingol, as well as the number of elves migrating from Beleriand, there is plenty more of Sauron to work with than the official timeline. And since the Noldor are greater in number this time around, so too would be their power. And assuming Sauron still wants to order the world, he's going to side with them probably as a different identity to advise them against the mortals of Eriador and or repairing Middle-earth, spreading lies about the mortals probably intending to stab them in the back. The one thing I'm not sure about is if Uru would allow an all-out war between his children to break out at all. But if you follow his character, he might send some kind of massive sign that ends it before it starts, or forcefully demand that the Noldor leave Middle-earth, or at least remain in Beleriand, with the Blue Mountains marking the division between them, similar to what happens with Numenor and Valinor, with the sea between them, and basically just enforce a kind of segregation in Middle-earth. Hard to say. Putting a pin in that thought though, even if war did break out, I think the Noldor would still defeat the Edain even without Sauron's help, having more of their number this time around than in the Silmarillion, but at the same time they're not going to go full Fëanor mode if you get my meaning, stopping the conflict and negotiating some kind of peace with the mortals, but still being able to set up realms, now expanding from the east of Beleriand to arguably the west side of the Misty Mountains, if the war actually goes well, because you never know, since Sauron might be helping these humans as well, they may actually fight better than the elves expect. That being said, if it does go bad, humans might choose to migrate further south and east to avoid contact with the Eldar, as some of them do in the main timeline. And I see the Sylvan elves following the same policy. In fact, the only real natives east of the Blue Mountains I see having any interaction with the Eldar is probably the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm. But I see them working with the Noldor rather than fighting with them, or at the very least remaining neutral, as if they're not provoked, then they have no skin in the game. And going with the possibility that the mortals may do better against the Noldor than expected, that the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm are supplying them armor, then that can go a long way to furthering that particular option. So assuming that things go well for the Noldor, their much stronger hold on Second Age of Middle-earth in this timeline would have Sauron having a much more difficult time seducing them to his cause, though I can still see him forging the rings because of the Eldar's desire to repair the world that they damaged. That being said, as I said earlier, the war would look different. With a stronger and larger Noldor nation to contend with, even Sauron will be hard-pressed to make any gains, as I said earlier, and his best bet would be to perhaps establish rival realms, either from the east of the Misty Mountains, all the way to Khand and Harad in the south, and then to the east of Rhûn, or, if Sauron is more successful in Eriador, then from the east of the Blue Mountains to Khand, Harad, and Rhûn. And because this is a stronger Eldar, the best Sauron could hope for probably would be a stalemate like in the First Age. Because while mortals do have a more of an impulse for war and produce more children than the elves do, a march from Eriador all the way to the western coast of Beleriand I cannot see. It would take centuries of fighting through not just the Noldor, but the Sindar, whom I still see maintaining their core presence in their ancient lands, and maybe even the Dwarves of the Blue Mountains as well, depending on how that goes. But that's enough of this particular rabbit hole. If you've been through it this long without shouting sacrilege, then you have my thanks, and I hope that this was entertaining or that you got something out of it. I just thought this would be a fun experiment because it's tracing kind of a butterfly effect from if the Sindar had just been able to perform better in one particular war way back in the First Age, then maybe all of these things would be different. And who's to say which one would be better and which one would not be better? What do you guys think? let me know comments below. And again, thank you for putting up with this, but this is the Middle-earth Philosopher, and you guys have a good day.